you know that one of the topics that gets everyone interested in holding conversations is anything that touches the pocket. And something seems to have a pin or a magnet with which it takes money out of your pocket or keeps money from getting to your pocket. And that one is electricity. And that's what we want to talk about this morning. You remember, of course, that the federal government gave that target that within October and December last year, let's target 1 million meters all across the nation, across the 11 distribution companies, DISCOs as we call them. And it's supposed to affect something in the region of 25 million households all across the nation. How far so far? Well, let's begin that conversation. But just to first of all notify you that from information available, even from the NERC, only 525,120 meters have been distributed in the past 2 years. How many were distributed between October and December last year? A little over 18,000. What's the reason for all of this? Let's begin the conversation this morning. We have with us the Executive Director, Association of Nigerian Electricity Distributors, ANED, Sunday Odonto. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Well, this is one of several things that's affected. Of course, I want to assume that you're as concerned as many people are about this issue. First of all, let's talk about the fact that we weren't able to meet that target of 1 million meters across the 11 DISCOs all over Nigeria. What happened?
Okay. Let me start first with a very sincere apologies to Nigerians, because when you have expectation and your expectations are not met, you have every right to be concerned, you have every right to be angry. The situation, I think we just need to put it in content for everybody to understand what happened. First of all, the current situation, which is even worldwide, the pandemic has a lot of role to play. It has a lot of impact on the situation. But let me start with how we got to where we are now.
Well, you know, just a quick one.
Yes.
While factoring that in, the
Yes.
pandemic in,
Yes.
don't forget that pledge was made within the pandemic.
Yes.
October last year it was supposed
Yes.
to start, and December was supposed to.
Yes.
We were supposed to have distributed the 1 millionth meter across
Yes.
Nigeria. I believe that the pandemic was factored in.
That was the plan. But nobody could even foresee what has happened, even in terms of the impact of the pandemic. In the last 2 months, what we have had worldwide, the second wave is even worse than the first one. But let me leave the pandemic aside. First, let us look at the whole thing critically well. With the government first, I think we need to commend the federal government for that initiative in the first place, which is to ensure that every single household in Nigeria is metered. And to that extent, between the federal government and all stakeholders, the regulator, our investors, and all the operators, there are a lot of commitments and agreements. There are a lot of discussion behind the curtain to ensure that this is achieved. And there are a lot of things that goes with it. But number one, this is an initiative that was also meant to create about 3 benefits for Nigerians. Number one, it was planned that doing this through our local meter manufacturers will strengthen the local manufacturers. Number two, it will also create jobs. And of course, number three, it is also aimed at sustaining the economy. Unlike in the past, when what will happen will be for the procurement of meter from abroad, the importer will just go and buy and then bring it to the country. Now, what they are trying to do is to ensure that we get these local meter manufacturers to make meters available And in the next 3 years, as much as 7 million meters. But what has happened is that there are a lot of issues with logistics. And some of these things, I'm happy you mentioned that we've done over 500,000.
In 2 years?
In 2 years, yes. Meters are not things that you just plug in, just procure and plug in. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of logistics. And it is not as easy as a lot of people think. This is not like buying a mobile phone and then slotting in the SIM card. And we're not giving excuses. All we're asking for is, one, for us to be patient with the government, knowing their good intention, for us to show understanding with the regulators and the operators. And I'm sure the meter manufacturers themselves, they will tell you the challenges that come with this thing.
Well, maybe
even the issue of funding.
Maybe we should actually listen to the meter manufacturers. Kola Balogun also joins us this morning virtually. He is Managing Director and Chief Executive of MOMAS. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Well, the expectations were high. 1 million meters, that's a lot of meters, and that's a lot of business. So Mr. Odunton has tried to offer some explanation from the DISCO side. What would it be from the manufacturer's side?
Thank you very much, Ayo. Good morning, Nigeria. Actually, we need to commend federal government for this quick intervention on deployment of meter to bridge the metering gap in the country. However, if you recall, there was a scheme that was going on across the country called Meter Asset Provider, which needed to be rounded up before we start implementing the national mass rollout. So a couple of the DISCO who have been paid for meter asset provider needed to tidy up those ends so that the new meter, which is supposedly to be free from the federal government, will come in. So between October and November, that's what most of the DISCOs are rounding up. However, there was inventory taken by the regulator from all the meter manufacturers, that what did you have in stock so that the federal government will pay for it and they will be able to deploy it to the consumer. I haven't realized that some of us has to go extra mile to ensure that this mass metering is successful. We have to train lots of Nigeria across the country so that as we are delivering new meters, we will be able to install along the processes. However, from the meter manufacturer, I declare 10,000 in stock, and I've delivered all the 10,000 to all the DISCOs. Others have declared some quantity. If they have delivered or not, that's another thing. But however, considering the process of acquiring or procuring raw materials and components across the globe, because of this pandemic, we could not meet up because it affected the entire logistics, coupled with clearing process at the port. All those things affected some of the 1 million targets the federal government had in mind between October and December. So those are the logistic constraints we have as a manufacturer. But we practically double the entire process to ensure that this scheme is a successful scheme. From my own end, we keep delivering little bit of data and they keep funding us. But we need sufficient funding to be able to buy components ahead, knowing fully that globally there is a constraint in terms of procuring raw materials and components for the manufacturing generally. It's not peculiar to metering. It's just the global pandemic that affects the logistics of getting components across the country. And that's where we need to actually plead with the system generally, including consumer, to bear it in mind that it will delay, but definitely the scheme is ongoing. And the whole idea is that it's not going to even stop at 1 million meters. The intention is that to close down the entire metering gap, which is supposed to be 6 million along the line. And that will take us some few years. And we use this opportunity to now develop further capability and expand all the capacity we have to be able to give more values in terms of employment, in terms of technology transfer, and so on and so forth. Those are the things we are trying to play around, and we are on it, and we are in the middle of it. Because of this,
Mr. Balogun, there are a good number of people who have so many questions right now. Data from NERC, if we can just show you this image that we cropped from the NERC report that talks about the number of people that have been metered over the past 2 years, between October, that's right there, between October 2019 and October, last year. I mean, it would seem like we weren't even, there wasn't any plan really. That's the way it would look. That all of these things that you have talked about, the shortcomings, first of all, there was, if you look at it, it's the combined MAP and NMMP meter deployment status. That means the previous program wasn't fast enough. And then this new one was supposed to expedite action. The mass meter asset provider or meter asset program was running before the NMMP program, came on, and people are wondering if a state of emergency, so to speak, was declared and it was supposed to produce something as expeditiously as possible, and it is not. Mr. Oduton, you would agree that people would have a lot of concerns. But before, I'm pretty sure that Wakwa will also have her own questions for you as well. But looking at all of this, it doesn't just add up. You're pleading for time. You're pleading for understanding. But don't also forget that this NMMP program is part of a much bigger program, the Economic Sustainability Plan of the federal government. So if that one is being slowed down, he's saying that, they're doing everything that they can. But between October and December, 18,000 out of 1 million meters all across Nigeria, that is most certainly pitiable.
Okay, let me again emphasize the reality that we have in this country. I think when we talk about manufacturing any product, you have to look at the components. You have to ask yourself the question.
He referenced my apologies, Mr. Oda. Yes. He referenced the issue of funding, but it is for the meter manufacturers to provide the meters for the discos. What's the end? What's the end of this stake, as far as the discos is concerned?
Well, for us as discos, it is in our interest for every consumer to be metered, because our studies have shown that wherever we meter people, there is less argument. But he also mentioned a critical point that I think we all need to, when we're asking for understanding, we're not just asking for understanding, we're asking for understanding so that people will understand how the system works. He mentioned something that is important, which is, he mentioned the issue of components. And let me explain that so that people can understand that. Basically, to manufacture a meter in Nigeria, we cannot, in this country, as at yet, we cannot manufacture all the components required for a meter to be a complete meter. So they still have to import some of the components. And why is that? Simple, because Ajaokuta is yet to come fully on stream. If we have Ajaokuta on stream, they will not need to go and import any other thing. So those things that they have to import, it is a simple thing. Everybody knows that. Across the world, getting cargo across the borders has become more and more difficult because of the pandemic. And we all know the way this thing is. So if they don't have the components, they cannot complete the process of manufacturing the meters. That is even a bigger problem. Now, same with the funding. What the federal government had done was to facilitate the funding, and those fundings comes as a loan on the book of the discos for there to be metered. The good news for the customers is that there's no upfront payment. So that's why you hear this thing is free. They don't have to pay for it to get it. But the issue of sufficiency, having enough number of meters, has to do with the issue of availability. The issue of availability has to do with the issue of manufacturing. The issue of manufacturing has to do with the issue of importation. Forex is there. Pandemic is there. There's no way you can perform any magic within 3 months when we have those things in place. But let us commend the government. For once, for them to have even thought about the initiative. It is so easy. Talk is cheap. We can sit down and criticize every day, but let us see the process
Mr. Oduton,
and let us ensure
Mr. Oduton, you would agree with me that it's only he who feels it that knows it. You're asking for patience. Mr. Balogun is also asking for understanding. Okay, Nnamani Alexander, for instance, says, as many people watching us, or maybe we'll be watching this broadcast later, that I applied for paying the fees. I applied after paying the fees, but for the past 5 months, it's been one story to another. The cost of going from one office to another just to inquire the reasons for the delay is almost getting close to the amount I paid. Yet, I get estimated bills that keeps increasing.
Okay, it is still the same point. The reality is that those things are not available for the number of people that require it. Okay?
But why ask them to pay when the materials, the facilities are not on ground? Because don't also forget that this is a second program. The NMMP is the second program.
Yes.
Those who paid on the previous program, they haven't received the meters.
Those who paid on the previous program were meant to get their meters first as soon as it is available. And let me also say that I started with apology because I know that not all those who are supposed to have gotten their meter have gotten it. But that is not to say that some people haven't got their meters. That Engineer Balogun just mentioned how many meters were supplied by his company. But the truth of the matter is that, like the Yoruba people say, when they say, Oma konyin won ti pe yin, to ba konyin won si ma pe yin, until it is your turn, until it gets to you, we know you will not be satisfied. It is natural, okay? What we are saying is that the process of procuring the components from abroad, then manufacturing the meters, then the installation of meters, these are not, it's not something that is very easy in terms of the capacity that we have within the country. But the good side of all of this, for instance, Engineer Balogun, that is MOMAS. MOMAS has trained so many Nigerians in the last 6 months on meter installation. That is job creation. Those are the good side of this thing. But the moment the federal government decides to strengthen the local manufacturers, of course, we should expect that if they have to import things, then the issue of funding, getting things in place, the forex, these are all the things that combine together. Okay. We are not just giving excuses. Okay. We are not saying it is perfect. We are not saying that's what we should have. We are saying that we all need to be more patient. We all need to see what is good when it is good, other than looking at everything and thinking we can perform magic. Okay. No miracle.
Mr. Balogun, let's just be clear. He has also alluded to a number of things that you mentioned, but let's just be clear. You have raised the issue of difficulty of importation as a result of COVID-19. Is there a funding problem, and whose responsibility is it to provide these funds specifically? Because if you say federal government, that's like maybe like 2,000 or 5,000 ministries, departments, and agencies. So who specifically, if there's a funding issue?
Yes, because of the presidential intervention, the funding arrangements has been made through the central bank. The central bank, they've started funding us. It's just that we need an accelerated funding so that we can procure more components in anticipation of the volume we are talking about. What the federal government and the regulators are doing this time around is really commendable, because if we can give a little space of time, but has to be monitored, is that we should allow this service improvement tariff to come in place. Because even if we have meter in the consumer premises, that has not guaranteed 24/7 power. With this service improvement tariff, each of the DISCO will be able to enhance their infrastructure to complement this metering scheme, such that consumer will now have 20 hours, 3 hours, 22 hours, 24 hours supply into their domain. So everything has to go in line, because as we are deploying meter, because the meter will keep coming, because the federal government keep funding it. We are targeting 6 million or 1 million in a short run, 6 million at the long run. It has to continue. The funding has to continue. The DISCO has agreed that they're going to be the obligor for the loan given to them through the CBN. And the CBN has insisted that all this effort has to be channeled to development of capability so that we can create job for the country. So the money is coming through the various MAP, Lansensi, and the manufacturer. And this is the reason why every one of us is on our toe to bring in more component by whatever means it requires. We have to start scouting for components to ensure that this target is met. However, it is also good to complement that effort by the DISCO to enhance all their infrastructure so that by the time we are having 100% battery, for instance, consumer will so be happy to ensure that the power is there, because it's a different thing for you to have meter in your domain, but you don't have power. So, but what will make efficiency along an entire value chain is this service improvement tariff, such that it will encourage the DISCO to upgrade all their infrastructure, enhance all their substations, so that there can be uninterrupted power into their consumer premises. And this service level improvement tariff, if I may explain, it will equally ginger a mixed grid into the network, because as soon as you enhance your infrastructure, one way or the other, you can plug in some other form of off-grid power that will guarantee 24/7. So these are things we need to encourage the entire sector player to ensure that this is consistent, such that everybody will have 24/7. And then the demand side load management will not come in, so that once you know that you have meter in your house, for instance, you have power in your house 24/7, you don't need to switch on all your appliances. You cannot plan your load management within your premises or within your household. These are good things that is on the way, but we need to keep our eyes on it such that we can have good reference at the end of the scheme. 1 year, I'm sure between 1 year, we'll start seeing some references that we can point out to some area where light has been improved. They have 22-hour supply and so on and so forth. But we need, all the stakeholders need to allow certain things to happen for us to have a good reference in the country. Thank you.
I'm just curious. Are you talking about another increment in tariffs? Because, service improvement tariff, isn't it already included in the current tariff? But I'm going to lump that with another question, which is what a number of Abuja residents are going through. Interestingly, in the report, in the meter deployment status, Abuja seems to have the highest here. They have installed so far 158,894 meters in Abuja, which is many times over, well, the next closest one is Ikeja. But, Ikeja is higher than Abuja, but Abuja is far, far higher than the next person after them. Just wondering, in Abuja, a lot of customers have experienced a situation where they're called to say, hey, we're coming to your residence, we're coming to change your meter from the one that you currently use, we don't know whether it is old or if it's new, to another particular meter. Now, people are wondering, a lot of people are clamoring for new meters, people who have not had any meter whatsoever, no prepaid meter, and here you are saying you want to come and change the one that is in our residence. What precisely is informing that? I don't know if Mr. Odunton can answer that, or yes, or the MD of MOMAS.
Okay, thank you very much, Malpe. Meters are instruments of measurement to measure consumption. Meters also have their lifespan. So when Abuja Disco announced that they were going to take some meters away and replace them, they are talking about obsolete meters. Any meter that is over 10 years old is no more a meter. It's just a box there because it will not work properly. That's just a simple answer to that. There's nothing like taking it for 1 meter. Nobody will take a new meter and swap it for anything, but we want to ensure that your meters are working correctly. And the issue of metering is still about the issue of population vis-a-vis what the population requires. A country of over 200 million people, we have more than 32 million households. So the meters that we need are more than 10 million as at this morning. So gradually the gap will be closed. It's a matter of time. I'm not saying it is fast enough, but I've spoken about Ajaokuta. Anybody who understands what that means should be able to get what I'm trying to say. Unless and until we get to that point, no miracle can come from heaven. We can pray from tonight to tomorrow morning. to have this thing, let us put other things in place. And Engineer Balogun said something, every stakeholder that are involved in anything that will bring progress to the country should do the right thing. Everybody, across the board, we all have roles to play. Even the consumers have roles to play. He mentioned the issue of tariff. I align myself 100% with all that he said. I don't need to add to it.
Mr. Odunton, if
The
you
only
can
point,
hear me, of changing those meters, because some people will argue that, you know, they're still working, they're still paying their bills through those meters. They're still getting charged. In fact, they have also experienced the increments that we've seen, the slight increment, even though they say there's no increment. But it's been a reduction in tariff. So if you buy 20,000 naira, it used to give you 479, now you're getting just about 400 on your meter. They're paying something. People are asking for something so that they can also be metered in some way. What is going on? Why are those people who already have prepaid meters the priority?
well, we are not saying those ones who already have prepaid meter are the priority. We are saying that if we are doing mass meter rollout cluster by cluster, and I get to my parents' house, and your meter is 11 years old, your meter is as bad as the other neighbor who has no meter. And these are few people. Yes.
No, it's not just few.
Not even,
no, Mr. Odunton,
yes.
It's not few. We'll show you some other information,
Yes.
you know, that will buttress the fact that what she's raising is actually quite significant. But that will be after this break. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Still about electricity and prepaid meters. Our guests are still with us. But, Mr. Odunton, you were talking, you know, about some things the other time. Of course, something that Engineer Balogun also mentioned. But let me show you these data from PwC, this information from PwC with data from the NERC. That talks about the fact that 50% of currently installed meters are obsolete or faulty. 50%. Mm-hmm. As at 2017, only 18.4% of households are on any disco network.
Yes.
Now, metering is based on metered, that's the data available, is based on identified customers, which are 4.09 million, according to this data, customers with obsolete meters, up to 1.7 million. And then there are those who are unidentified or disconnected customers that run up to 33.1 million. Can you validate or?
Oh, yes, that's what it is. Let me start with the unidentified customers. We're talking about customers who are connected to the network but not known to the discos. Of course, we've been able to get more people into the dragnet in the last 7 years through various stages of enumeration across the country. So for those that are not known, that's a problem, and what we try to do every day is to identify them and then bring them on board and get them captured. The 1.7 million customers are the one I was saying, once the meters are obsolete or faulty, the right thing to do is to replace the meters. And that's what I was trying to tell Mark, that we will not go and remove a functioning perfect meter. I use the word perfect. Just because your meter is reading doesn't make it perfect. We will not go and remove that and give you a new one when there are people in the neighborhood that still need meter who are on estimated billing. And by the way, let me repeat, and I've said it many times, we are not interested in estimated billing. And let me say it again, because I know, unfortunately, people seem to have this mindset. Oh, they want that. Wherever we put prepaid meters in this country, there is always what we call revenue assurance. And you won't hear any argument. The only problem we have with those ones is as many as 47% of prepaid meters are bypassed. That's another problem. That's the issue of theft, energy theft. Again, we deal with that as it occurs, as we can see. But to talk about estimated billing on its own is evil, because it comes in two ways, overbilling and underbilling. only on few occasions that you find it to be relatively accurate. So it is when it is over billing that we call it crazy billings. Not all bills are crazy. The ones that are underbilled, they will not complain. We don't want that. We want meters. And I'm talking about the issue of availability. The moment we are able to manufacture all components in this country, nobody will be talking about forex. Nobody will be talking about numbers.
We'll go back to Markwe after now, but Victor always saying this. Let's be clear. It is the law that once you pay for the meters, the DISCO has no right to bring bills again until they supply your meter. He says it is the law. Why are they still sending estimated bills to that man who paid for a meter?
Well, I can tell you for a fact that if there are cases where people find errors in the process or in the system, you have every right to complain, and I can assure you that such errors will be corrected. It is very easy in this system, as we have it, for there to be mistakes, and mistakes do happen, okay? So the issue of estimated billing or the issue of people paying for meters and not getting it, the issue of payment and not getting it has to do with what Engineer Balogun and I have been talking about, and there's no point repeating that. But the point that people need to understand is that we all need to be patient and wait, because this process or this industry, as we have it today, since 2013, when it was privatized, people need to understand that it is a journey. It's a very long journey. The reform process is a long journey, and we're not there yet. And that's why we do not pretend telling people that everything is fine. Okay. Until we get there, there will be some bumps and issues on the way. What matters most is for us to be able to respond quickly and resolve the issue. And that we're trying to do at DISCO.
Well, Engineer Balogun, one of the arguments that has also come up is the variety of the meters. Some argue that, look, why don't we just have the same kinds of meters to all the DISCOs? Maybe it'll be faster to produce the same kind of meters for all 11, DISCOs at the same time, rather than, provide a different one for a different DISCO. After all, while some, compare what happens in telecoms, in some segments with what happens in the electricity sector, they say that there are other aspects of the power sector that cannot be compared. This hardware thing, for instance, why can't we have the same kind of meter? After all, it's the same electricity.
Thank you very much, Ayo. Like what more perhaps as a question concerning replacement of some meters on consumer premises, it has to do with what you just asked now. Now, there's this energy accountability that is going on so that each of the DISCO can pay for their electricity on the off-stream. They want to be able to pay for feeders. They want to be able to pay for each of the substations that we have. So if their substation has been metered, which means from the grid, from the feeder, the transmission or the bulk trader can pick the load and know what quantum of power that they have delivered to that substation, that transformer, for instance. And the composition of the consumer connected to that transformer are mixed match of meters, such that they are not smart. If they are not smart, there is no how you will be able to compare the load consumed by consumer as to the load bill, the energy bill from the transformer. So they need to change all the consumer to make sure that they have uniform protocol or uniform kind of smartness to allow them to be upload the load each of the household consumed to match it with energy that they bill from the transformer, so that they will know whether there is a bypass or there is commercial losses or technical losses, and they will be able to do the needful to clean up that side. They want to ensure that each of these substation or transformer are accounted for. And for you to be able to do proper accountability along the value chain, you must meter uniformly in terms of the technology on the baseline, so that energy accountability can, because it's a different thing for you to meter the transformer, and you now meter the consumer at the other hand of various types of meter that they are not smart. Some are still using analog, some are using old electronic, some are using the old class 2 meters, because all these meters we are deploying now, they are all class 1. They are more accurate than class 2. And class 2 as to the disco is energy loss or is commercial losses. So they need to change all of them to class 1 so that they will measure the same thing and they will have the same technology protocol so that they will be able to read those information to negate it with what the market operator has built them from the transformer. These are energy auditing procedure that is going on to tidy
sorry
up
to
the
interrupt
network.
you, For a lot of people, I think the issue has to do with trust. If you can hear me, it has to do with trust. Because one of the things that ought to be done when those meters are installed is to say that they have an expiry date. On so-and-so day, by this time, you know, these meters are going to expire. What you find right now is that people are saying, look, it looks like they just want our meters to read faster. If they cannot get to increase electricity tariffs, you know, publicly, then they will find a way behind it by changing meters that have been configured to read a lot faster. You also talked about service improvement bill. People are wondering, hasn't that been included? Because in the last couple of weeks, we have seen a slight increment in charges, or at least a decrease in the number of units got, despite buying the same amount for the same period. How do you respond to that? Isn't that some service improvement charge already being incorporated in what consumers are paying?
Yes, thank you, Marco. It's very important for all the stakeholders, including the consumer, to have a clear understanding of service improvement tariff. The whole idea is that, look, if you can have 24 hours power supply, there is tendency that the type of the supply process can be mixed grid. And we will spend more money to ensure that the power that gets to your domain is of high quality because we have enhanced the infrastructure along that side. So people must pay extra for you to enjoy that 24 hours. And that's why I mentioned the issue of demand side load management, because now that you have the comfort that I have power 22 hours or 24 hours, then you can switch off all your appliances in the house. Because oftentimes people abuse electricity, they just put on the power because they are not sure of having the power all the time. So every consumer, if you have to pay a little high to have that assurance of 24 hours, it makes sense. However, if you look at the tariff structure that he put in place, there's some low-end tariff for people who cannot be guaranteed sufficient hour of supply, and they still maintain the old rates. It's only if, for instance, let me give Lekki Phase 1 as a typical example. If all of us, most of the people residing in Lekki Phase 1, they have generator in all their houses, and the inconvenience of, fueling needs, sending your words to go and buy fuel and so on and so forth. And somebody can say, look, I can give you 24 hours because we have some embedded power scattering even across Lagos, which they can feed in with the grid together to guarantee that 24-hour supply. Why would I want to put on my gen? So let me pay a little bit to save pollution because the noise is there, the pollution is there. If the environmental factors are there, if all those things can be put aside by giving me 22 hours or 24 hours, I can pay a little more. These are reasons why we should allow this new structure of service improvement tariff to come in place. Anybody that doesn't want to pay that same tariff, in that structure, he has an option that I want to stay within this band. I want to have 10 hours, 6 hours of supply, and I'll pay this rate. And the system has provided sufficient technology to be able to switch that consumer into that number of hours and will be paying the old tariff. So everybody needs to be educated sufficiently because it is when we're able to pay for the upstream, pay for the generation, pay for the transmission that we'll be able to have cost guarantee.
All right, Engineer Balogun, a quick one on what you just said now about everyone, needing to do the needful. Very, very quickly. So just to be clear, how soon should people look forward to getting meters? Very quickly. we're already behind time. So how soon?
If it is the 1 million issue, I'm sure before June, the 1 million will be exhausted. But for the 6 million for the entire nation to be metered, we are talking about 2 years or 3 years, as the case may be. But
all right,
that will give us improvement,
every
development.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. But 6 months for 1 million and 2 years, 6 million, and you say we have a deficit of 10 million. We're looking at 5 years then, right?
Well, as time goes on, I believe that within the next 5 years, all households in Nigeria should be metered. And when I talk about 10 million, we're talking about even people that are still building. We're talking about the deficit that we have, the metering gap, and the 6 million, the 7 million being planned, first the 1 million, and he has told us now that hopefully by June, that 1 million will have been done. And like I said, until you are metered, even if your next door neighbor is metered, you still have a right to be shouting no meter anywhere.
But on that, a good number of people are saying that law, which we referenced earlier, that once you have paid for a meter, you shouldn't receive any billing at all. People do not know that such a law exists. But the challenge with that would be if they are using power and the discos are supplying
free
the
of
power.
Charge.
And yes, that's what the law says, isn't it? So how respond to that?
Well, the only response I'll give you on that is that we have a regulator. The regulator will roll out the rules and the regulation for us as operators. It is not the intention of the regulator that anybody should be using electricity free of charge because it doesn't come free to the distributor. And when you talk about discos, always remember the discos are just distributors, not the owner of the product.
But don't also forget
so
that
you cannot,
we're talking about
we're
talking about
Mr.
Dutton,
yes.
We're talking about the element of the law here. Once you have paid for a meter, you should not receive any bill. You should only be billed from that meter.
Whoever has any grievance in the process or within the system, please refer that to the regulator.
So you say that you're saying essentially that discos still bill people who have paid for meter but have not received the meter.
I've not told you
the
that.
law says that they shouldn't.
No, I'm not saying that. And people need to understand, and I'll repeat it again, the issue of how electricity gets to your home and the billing process, including the billing platform, in most cases are automated. When there's a mistake or an error, it will be corrected. It has to be corrected. And the issue of thinking about any law that will permit you to use electricity free of charge, it means that you care less about the generation companies, the gas providers. Those suppliers will not supply. Those producers will not be able to produce unless and until the products are paid for.
Well,
that is a fact. Yes. That is what we must know.
But don't also
looking
forget
for
that
loopholes will not help.
This is not a point of looking for a loophole.
It's
not looking for a loophole.
It is.
The consumer is interested in paying for the electricity, so he paid for a meter. And the law says so long as you have paid, until your meter is supplied, you should not pay any. But then, just as you said, we'll have to take this up with the NERC, which, by the way, we reached out to also be a part of this conversation. That's the NERC, who is regulating the electricity sector in Nigeria. Unfortunately, we're waiting word from them. Hopefully, we'll get word back shortly. But we have to thank you, gentlemen, for your conversation with us this morning. Sunday Odutom is the Executive Director, Association of Nigerian Electricity Distributors, ANED, as well as Engineer Kola Balogun, who is the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Momas Meter Manufacturing Company. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We're back in a moment. Do stay with us.
Well, we turn our attention now to education and allied matters, particularly tertiary education and allied matters. You do know that the Academic Staff Union of Universities were on strike for a long time, and eventually they were able to call a truce with the federal government, and they have now agreed that they will go back to work. The question is when. And it seems that controversy is brewing in that area. We have with us this morning Professor Biodun Ogunyemi, who is the President, Academic Staff Union of Universities. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, we also have with us Comrade Abdusobir Salam, who is the National Vice President, Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities, SSANU. Comrade, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Let me start with you, Prof, here in Abuja. What do you make? I mean, what exactly is delaying? It looks like now, the federal government initially said a January 18 opening date for schools in general. And people were looking forward to resumption. Even some schools had set January 11th, some had set January 7th, but a lot of them now had to, go with the federal government's reopening date. But even that is not certain anymore. However, before this uncertainty came about, ASU was already saying, look, we don't think we want to go back. Oh, this is not looking good for us. What exactly is ASU's concerns?
Thank you very much. Our concerns are well-founded and they are grounded in the health and safety of our members. Naturally, you expect government to do a situation assessment before asking universities to reopen. Government rolled out some guidelines in July 2020. And when you study that guideline or the guideline document, you find that they have even prescribed there what should be done before educational institutions are reopened. For instance, they have checklists for compliance with COVID-19 protocols, non-pharmaceutical aspects. And we have not seen that assessment being done. We have not seen government and university authorities taking concrete steps to assess the level of safety for our members and, of course, for our students. In as much as we are ready to go back, we have told government we are ready to even put extra efforts to get things going. But it appears what we have been talking about since about the middle of last year, that government was not doing enough to address the two emergencies that we had, the emergency in the health sector as well as the emergency in the educational sector. Take, for instance, how can we ensure or assure social distancing in crowded classes, congested hostels? Our hostels, are they fumigated? The classrooms, what flexible arrangements are in place?
Who should be leading the way in that? Some people will say that it looks like ASU is having the battle with the wrong person. Shouldn't that be with the university authorities?
This is a situation of emergency. I'm not sure universities can cope. Why is government intervening in the health sector now?
Well, have they even tried? Have they tried at all? Because if you have reached an agreement, and we already know just how far back our students are, when you compare them with where they ought to be ordinarily, when this resumption date is agreed upon, has there been any conversation with university authorities to say this is where we are right now? What plans do you have in place to ensure that when we come back, the safety and security of our members of staff and even the students who will come to classes are assured? And if physical communication is not possible, what online methods are we researching or putting in place? What infrastructure is going to be in place in such a way that we can still accomplish the same things with minimal contact?
Yes, we are aware that some universities are putting measures in place to explore opportunities available in alternative learning models. We are aware that some universities are initiating moves to go the way of blended classes, virtual and physical, in which case there could be alternative attendance, there could be virtual classes, and they are taking steps to institute learning management system platforms in those institutions. But this efforts being made by the universities, they are limited. They get to a point that they cannot go further. For instance, ASU has been talking about revitalization. These were some of the areas where the intervention will have assisted. For instance, the universities don't have the infrastructure for ICT in most cases that are functional. And you need some huge funds to do this. So when ASU was talking about revitalization way back 2012, and government undertook the needs assessment of the universities, we expected government to continue along that trajectory of, intervening and injecting funds massively, so that by the time we see a situation like this, we could easily, deploy existing facilities and procedures. Take learning academic institutions, higher institutions in other climes. Take, for instance, South Africa. Even during the lockdown, learning was not stopped because they were easily able to deploy existing infrastructure, ICT facilities, support for students, support for lecturers in terms of data plans, in terms of even access to laptops and so on. We don't see that happening here. And people are saying, well, start virtual classes. But we know more than 60% of our students will run into problems. They cannot afford data on their own. The Wi-Fi that you expect to see on campuses is not there. And we find that though people say they spend money using phone calls, but at the end of the day, if you interact closely with our students, you find that over 60% of them cannot even afford their Android phones and so on. So we have these limited capacities where government should come into the foray and ensure that the environment is made conducive for alternative models of teaching and learning.
The question is, what exactly is on the ground right now? Because some people will say that this also, should test the creativity of university authorities. SSANU, thankfully, SSANU is represented here, and ASU as well, that they are supposed to be problem-solving institutions as well. I mean, they're not just solving problems for society as a whole and teaching individuals to solve those problems. We should see them rise to the occasion in situations like this. But it doesn't seem that we have seen that. What we seem to be seeing is, a constant intervention, asking government to intervene. We haven't seen the steps that, the authorities themselves have taken in such a way that you can say, hey, look, we're at a wit's end here. This is what we've done. This is what we've tested. And this is where we think we'll need help.
That doesn't apply in all cases. As we speak, I can tell you of, a number of universities where they're exploring the pathway of alternative learning models. And that is creativity. I know where training has commenced, for learning management system platforms. And these are things they're doing on their own. But where they get stuck is, for instance, what happens to congested hostels? What happens to crowded classrooms? Those are not things they can address without major intervention. A part of the problem we see with current approach to COVID-19 pandemic is that universities are not factored into the equation. Whereas that should be the center. That should be the incubation center for finding solutions. For instance, talk about these laboratories that are talking about. Nobody is thinking of, let's get our universities challenged. Let's get them to start looking to this direction. We know of few efforts of some of our members that have attracted grants to conduct some of this research. They attracted grants on their own. But we are saying that as government is planning intervention, they are thinking of establishing research institutes, injective fund into some teaching hospitals. Teaching hospitals they are supposed to be laboratories of the universities. And molecular laboratories and so on. How many are they planning for the universities?
Let's quickly flip this to Lagos now. Ayo.
Well, it's interesting the angle you took that conversation, Markwe, because one would expect, so let me just take that question to Comrade Salam. Talking about the creativity that universities should actually employ. Would you say, because a number of people might be thinking, wait a minute, most of the people who are in universities are well above age 18. Is there anything wrong with having an interface with them to see how, if they also have ideas that can help them to get back to school safely, because they're really eager to go to school? As a form of leadership intervention, if the ideas came from the students themselves, maybe they would abide by it and not just wait for some orders from above.
Well, thank you very much. I think I would agree with the president of ASU on the fact that COVID-19 has thrown up challenges for us. I was reading the newspapers today, and the first thing one of the things I read was that today marks exactly 1 year that the first casualty of COVID-19 died. That is at Wuhan. Today marks 1 year. And what it means is that for the past 1 year, the world has been grappling with a lot of challenges. The president of ASU has cited the case of South Africa and a lot of countries where they have continued to run their academic activities, even in the face of the pandemic. And then the question would arise, yes, there are challenges in Nigeria. There are challenges with our educational system, but I do not think that as at today, it is enough reason for us to continue to insist that the universities should be closed down. That's my position, that I do not think that having had 1 year of students staying at home, we should still morally, at this point in time, continue to maintain that students should continue to remain at home because the universities are not prepared to reopen. And that raises a question, or that raises a number of questions. One of the questions that it raises is that who is the government as far as universities are concerned? To the best of my knowledge, and according to the law, the university, based on the autonomies of the universities, are the universities themselves. They are the government, which means that the universities, to a large extent, should be able to devise means by which they can be able to run in the face of what is before us now. Not for us to be seeking interventions from government. Yes, government can intervene, government can assist because we have an emergency situation on hand. But I believe that beyond asking for government intervention, we should be able to look inwards to ask ourselves, what have we been able to do to ensure that the universities can resume? That is one. Two,
on that, before you go to two,
yes.
What kind of options do you think are likely, are applicable for the government of the universities, as you put it?
Well, first and foremost, like I said, when you are talking of governments of the universities, you are talking of the councils, you are talking of the Senate. It places a moral burden on academics to look at the domestic challenges we have, the local problems we have in Nigeria. You are talking of the challenge of data, you are talking of the challenge of Wi-Fi and what have you. I think some of these things can be domesticated within the context of Nigeria. The people who originated Wi-Fi originated them to solve a problem. The people who originated data originated them to solve a problem. And if we are academics, if we work in a system where we are supposed to research, where we are supposed to innovate, I think what we need to do is to look at our own local challenges and be able to say, how can we be able to bridge the gap? How can we be able to surmount the challenges within the context of our environment?
All right. Don't forget the second point you wanted to make, but let me quickly bring in this. One of the questions, one of the issues that the ASU president raised as well is that about 60% of the students don't have Android devices or any smart device at that. So,
exactly. Now, that's why I was talking about we being able to devise means within our own environment. What do I mean? Now, for example, an alternative platform. It may not necessarily have to do with online classes. It may not necessarily have to do with data. It may not necessarily have to do with Wi-Fi. For example, recorded classes by lecturers could assist, where lectures could be recorded. And when they are recorded, they are circulated. They are circulated through various means. In fact, halls and what have you could be such that the lecturer does not have to repeat himself, and students at their convenience can go through these lectures without necessarily having to be in class.
Essentially, you are actually talking about online schooling, but I don't know if the ASU president wants to very quickly respond to that one.
Thank you very much. I did say that we know of universities where they are already deploying learning management system. A learning management system is actually a platform that facilitates online interaction and simulate classroom situations. What my comrade in Lagos is saying is not new to us, but we must be careful to differentiate between accessing ready-made materials, which the student can do anytime on their own. We must differentiate that from an interactive setting, because what we actually called teaching learning process, which is the core of the pedagogy, requires feedback from your students. Recorded lectures, for instance, will not help you to address the problem of evaluation, will not help you to ask evaluative questions, will not help you to monitor whether your students actually understand what you have put out or not. So we have always had
Prof.
that, what we call asynchronous.
Prof, just one moment.
Asynchronous.
I think that the idea was just for you to very quickly respond to that one to see if it is something that, is possible. But then don't also forget that, there are online schools where people do MBA and all those other things, but then we'll come to that some other time. Yes, you were saying, you wanted to raise a second point.
Yes, I think what I wanted to say was that presently we have a moral challenge. And that moral challenge has been, is the fact that we have had the situation where students have been at home, not necessarily even because of the pandemic, but on account of an industrial action, which I would not want to go into the details. But the reality of it is that now that industrial action has been put behind us, we must find ways of ensuring that the system resumes. And that one way or the other, like I said, it's about innovation. It's about creativity.
But when you say that all of these issues are over, what then do we make of the protest strike that your body is talking about?
Well, thank you very much. I didn't want to go into that, but since you have raised it. For us, presently, we are not interested in going on strike. And I'm talking of SSANU and NASU. We are not interested in going on strike. Yes, there are protests, but that is another means of expressing your grievance without necessarily having to shut down the system. As we speak now, there is a moral burden on all stakeholders in the university system to ensure that our universities resume. And that's why, yes, it is not totally over, because even the MOU signed by our sister union has not even been totally consummated. So it's not as if it is over. We have our own existing grievances, which have even just reared their ugly heads within the last 2 weeks.
What are
3
these
weeks.
issues?
Well, first and foremost, we signed, this is a copy of the MOU. I actually brought it this morning, signed on Tuesday, 20th October, 2020, with the Honorable Minister of Labor and representative of the Ministry of Education with respect to our grievances on IPPIS. Similarly, with respect to our grievances on the payment of earned allowances, with respect to our grievances on the payment of national minimum wage, with respect to our grievances on the issue of visitation panels, with respect to our grievances on the issue of usurpation of headship of non-teaching units by academic staff. A myriad of other issues which had come up, which we signed an MOU in October 2020 with the Ministry of Education, with the Ministry of Labor, and with other stakeholders in government. And up till today, we have not been able to see the actualization of that MOU. Out of all, about 7 issues that were agreed upon, only one, and that one was yesterday. That is the issue of constitution of visitation panels. It was only yesterday that that was made public. So out of 7 issues, only one, and that was barely 24 hours ago, which that was addressed.
And so if an agreement of 2009 between the federal government and your association or your union has not been aligned to until now, and this one you said one of how many?
One of, what do you mean?
You said a number of issues.
Yes, about 7.
7 out of 7 issues.
Only one
has been addressed, and it was just addressed yesterday. And this is why you are talking about a protest strike right now.
Yes.
Okay,
Not a protest strike, a protest.
A protest.
Yes.
What is the objective of this protest?
Well, the objective of the protest would be to draw the attention of government to the MOU and to the challenges that non-teaching staff face in the university system. So we have an existing MOU, and our intention is to draw the attention of government, to draw the attention of stakeholders to say, look, we do not want to go the way of a strike. We do not want to go the way of shutting down the universities. The president of ASU, my comrade president, has made 1 or 2 pertinent issues with respect to the fact that there's a challenge in the health sector. Don't forget that our members are the medical doctors in the health centers. Don't forget that our members are the nurses and the pharmacists in the medical centers. Don't forget that non-teaching staff are the medical laboratory technologists. So at the end of the day, even within the university system, if we say that we want our members not to resume work now, and we embark on an industrial action, the implication is that universities cannot even hold, but cannot resume, particularly in the face of a pandemic. So we are very conscious, very cognizant of the fact that a strike would not do justice to us at this material point in time. It is not what the system needs after having gone through 1 year of a shutdown of academic activities in the universities. And that's why we are having a strike, a protest, which is to draw the attention, to drum up.
What's the nature of this protest, and has it started?
Yes, it has, across the universities. At least it should have, even though I am not on ground. I'm in the studio now. But the nature of the protests is to drum up sensitization of all stakeholders, the management, the media, and what have you, to the present situation, and to demand that they prevail on government to do the needful.
Okay. Well, Prof, I'm sure Malco will take it from here, but then there is also that talk on the streets as well that all of the agreement between ASU and the federal government are yet to be met. Could you give us an update?
Well, thank you very much. Before I go to that, let me quickly clarify some aspects of my comrade's presentation. There are 2 principles that guide the operations of ASU. The first one is the principle of trade union solidarity. That trade union solidarity demands that we don't do anything to obstruct other trade unions in the same working environment in making demands that will improve the welfare and well-being of their members. So we believe in workers' solidarity as ASU. But the other principle, which complements the first one, is the principle of reciprocity. What that means is that we have to respect, as we respect other unions will also respect our right to use the best means that we know of or we think is most appropriate to make our demands. And that brings me to the issue of saying, well, universities were locked down for 1 year and they will have moral burden. I don't know what that means exactly. But if I must say this, we don't think a sister union should come out to start insinuating that we granted universities, and because of that, we should not demand what we think is necessary for us to have a suitable environment for us to perform optimally in our callings. So what that means also is that what ASU is doing is in the interest of the system, is in the interest of the country.
Yeah, but sorry to interrupt you, Prof. I mean, you say you don't understand what it means by a moral burden. If students who ordinarily ought to be in school are not in school, are not doing anything with their lives, and they're just waiting for that time when they can go back to school, it looks like 1 year of their lives have just gone by, without being productively utilized as a result of the strike, action. And of course, not to say that there is no justification for the strike. You have made your point and you have been listened to. Now it's time for resumption. And you're still saying, look, it looks like everything has not been put in place. We need more intervention before we can go back. Will you say that you're being fair to those who have been put in your charge, especially when you look at the future of the country?
Margaret, please don't misunderstand me. ASU has never said anywhere that we're not ready to resume. We have to make that clear. We're ready to resume. But what we're asking of government is that you have put protocols in place, you have put a checklist in place. Apply your checklist to assess the situation.
Who should
is
apply?
Is anybody concerned that professors are dying like chickens? Is anybody worried that professors are dying on our campuses like chickens?
Indeed, it is very sad to see, especially in the last few weeks.
Yes.
The number of professors that have lost their lives.
That's the point.
As a result of COVID-19. I mean, this is without schools being in session.
Yes.
That ought to be noted. However, moving forward, don't you think that the solutions should also lie within the universities? That's the point a lot of people are trying to make.
But that's exactly the point I made earlier. That universities are making efforts, but they need support. You see, what government did when the aviation industry was to come back was to move out and assess the situation. And where they found gaps, they took steps to address them. We are saying the same thing should be done about universities.
The aviation sector is largely different from the universities.
Okay.
The aviation sector, everybody knows, was largely, in fact, if not felt the biggest impact next to tourism, or they felt the same amount of impact because nobody was going anywhere. So, as a result, that place was grounded. The universities are different. They have a certain amount being allocated to them. That hasn't changed. The salaries of members of staff are being paid. What exactly, to what end, or to what challenges are the universities going to be addressing with the funds that they currently have at their disposal? Yes, we know that not all universities are at the same level, and it is the job of ASU to say, hey, look, all our members are important. Nonetheless, what universities are you highlighting to say, but this university has gone down this route? Our members here, can you look here and see how it is that you guys can copy? Is that going on some peer review?
Let me bring you up to speed. Some weeks back, the NUC requested universities to submit what they required to open universities. They did send reports to them. To what extent has NUC addressed the request from universities? Because when you start a step, you see it through. So we have the right to be worried that the health and safety of our members should be paramount in the equation. And that is what is missing here. Let people not misunderstand us. We also see the challenge. 2 of my children are at home. And many of my colleagues, they have their children back home. So we too are under pressure to reopen the universities. And that is why we are looking in the direction of alternative modes of learning. So that even if there's a lockdown now, if we need to declare lockdown, government will declare lockdown. It happened in Britain. It happened elsewhere. Even in part of China, it's happening. So if government wants to do that, we must put in place structures that can enable us to continue. That is what we are saying.
How long? I mean, first and foremost, people would like specifically, what sort of structures are we looking at? How long will it take, assuming we have the resources, to be able to, deploy the structures?
Okay, I gave the example of learning management system, which is the core infrastructure you need to have virtual learning. So let nobody think we are not thinking. Let nobody think Senate is not proactive in each university. So if this is happening, they get to a point to say, for us to effectively implement this, we need X amount apart from what we can generate. As we speak, many universities now, they charge lecturers to subscribe for data, to provide Wi-Fi on campuses. Our members pay part of their salaries monthly. It happens only to academic staff. So other support staff in the system, they do not kind of things. And even when lecturers say they cannot work, they are paying these people, but what are they delivering? These are the issues we should be engaging. So when people now come out to say it's as if academic staff members are interested in granting the universities, I think they're being economical with the truth. They're not saying the truth. The truth is that the basic tools we need to get the system going will have to be in place for academic staff to be able to deliver on their mandate. And that is the missing link. So I'll tell you, as recent as yesterday, we are still in a meeting with the Minister of Education. The Minister of State was also there. I'm talking about memorandum of action that we had. As we speak, government has not paid the salaries they were to pay. So that could also dampen the morale of our members. And we are worried. Only that we are not expressing these things for now because we are engaging government. We believe in consultation before we go to the level of confrontation. We are not yet there. Government is assuring us that they will fulfill their obligations, they will do what they have promised to do, and we are banking on that. And that is why we keep on pacifying our members. Please, don't go the way of saying government has failed. Let's say government is reassuring us, and we're engaging government.
So the students who are watching this morning, because
Yes.
I mean, you say your children too are at home.
They're at home. My children are
and
at
I'm
home.
sure they're looking at you.
They are watching me.
Daddy, when is this strike going to be?
They
up?
ask me.
When are we going back to school? But for other students who are watching this morning and are wondering, when is this thing going to? We want to go and learn. You know, what alternatives are being put in place? What would you say to them? Very
Yes,
quickly?
we want to reassure our children, who are also our students, that ASU members, they are fully ready and prepared to deliver on their mandate. They're ready to teach. Teaching them does not mean we should have physical interactions where it becomes impossible. But we are working at the level of our universities to promote alternative modes. There are things we could do. We could do alternative attendance. We could do segmented sessions. And in addition to that, LMS that I talk about. So if we have those things effectively taking place, as we speak, I know of more than 3 universities where lecturers are being trained on how to do virtual teaching. It is part of the innovations. So people should not think lecturers just went back and relaxed because they don't want to work. We are ready to work because that's the thing we know how best to do.
Well, we have to thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Professor Biodun Ogunyemi is the president of the National Association, beg your pardon, of the Association Academic Staff Union of Universities. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's back to you now, Ayo.
Well, yes, but just before we let you go, Comrade Salam, so which way forward now? People want to go back to school. You don't want to go on strike, or maybe you want to, first of all, respond to some of the things that
No, there's nothing to respond to. I think the only thing I would say is that we still have a moral burden to ensure that our system does not remain grounded. I maintain it. It is not an indictment if you throw a stone and somebody feels, or some people feel it has hit them. Well, but it's not about a sister union. It's about the entire system. All stakeholders have a moral burden at this material point in time. When I mean stakeholders, I'm talking of government that has signed agreements with unions. And when I mean unions now, I'm not even talking about non-teaching unions alone, but even with ASU, because like the president of ASU said, you signed an agreement with them and you have not consummated that agreement. So it is a moral burden on government. It's a moral burden on university managements. It is a moral burden on all the unions to ensure that our universities are no longer grounded.
Any role for students in all this?
Well, to an extent, there may be roles in the sense of, okay, when you resume, these are the things you must do, and they should ensure that they comply with it. But ultimately, in all of this, the students are the victims. And that's the sad part about it. And that's why when I talk about a moral burden, it saddens me that somebody will still, after 1 year of closure, and we cannot say, okay, in the face of the exigencies, in the face of where we have found ourselves, that we should be able to ensure that out of the necessities, out of the demands, that we're able to create something new, something that can work for us, something that can be practical within our own environment, that will not have a burden on students, will not have a burden on the system. Okay. And we still say we want this system to be shut down. I think it's unfortunate.
Well, we have to thank you very much, Comrade Abdul Sobur Salam, who is the National Vice President, Senior Staff Association of Nigerian University, SSANU. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
for your time this morning.
Thank you.